Welcome back, all you A-Push people, where we left off in video number 1 about the caste system of the Spaniards in the New World, Las Castas. Where we left off, we were saying that, well, if Spaniards mixed with Indians, then you could eventually, if you had enough Spaniards in your bloodline, just revert to being referred to as a Spaniard. 7/8 or better. Well, that would eventually just have you being considered a Spaniard like other people who had come from Spain or were born in the New World to purely Spanish parents. Well, the opening slide for the first video showed this is not just mixing between Europeans and Indians, it also involved Africans as well. So, what happens in the New World if, say, a Spanish parent and an African parent have a child? Well, in this case, what it says is Spaniard and Mora, which is just the Spanish word for Moor. Those of you who've read Shakespeare, I'm sure, have been introduced to the word Moor. It essentially is a way to talk about Africans. In some contexts, it implies Muslim as well, but it doesn't necessarily need to. What it's really about is African in this usage. And so somebody who was born to a Spanish father and an African mother would be half Spanish and half African this time. It's not half Spanish, half Indian, so they needed a new word. And the new word was mulatto. And mulatto is still a word in use today. It's not a super polite one, but it's also not considered rude. It's just considered anthropological. And it can essentially mean just mixed blood, black and white. But back in earlier American history, and at this time, it specifically meant exactly half and half. You had a white parent and you had a black parent. The word was mulatto. All right, so let's do the same process we did before. What if the mulatto boy or girl, technically, grows up and marries a Spaniard and has a baby there? So somebody who's a full-blooded Spaniard having a child with somebody who's half Spaniard and half African, their offspring now will be 3/4 Spaniard and 1/4 African, by the same process of the 4 grandparents we talked about in the last video. So they needed another word. And so Morisco down here meant somebody who was 3/4 Spanish and 1/4 African. It's the equivalent of a castizo from the Indian side in the last lecture. So what we want you to get from this one, part 2, is a worse element of the racism in the system. Let's say that this Morisco girl in this case, or a Morisco boy, grows up and marries a Spaniard, pure-blooded person whose lineage comes from Spain, in their eyes. Well, okay, if you follow the logic from the last time, that's going to make this person 7/8 Spanish and 1/8 African. And we said in the last video, 7/8 or better means you're considered a Spaniard, so there's no new name. But we said that about 7/8 or better mixing with Indian blood. If your 1/8 was African blood, they created a new word. The word was Chino. And it's got nothing to do with China. Nothing to do with that at all. Today in Spanish, a man from China, Chino, and okay, great. But that's not where this word comes from. So this Chino basically means, in this caste system, if Spaniards mixed with Africans, there really wasn't a way to get the title Spaniard back. Your family lineage would never be considered Spaniard again. Pretty ugly, isn't it? Now, if somebody like this has pure Spaniard parent on one side, or marries a pure Spaniard, and then so forth and so on that way, Well, eventually you could get to the point where somebody could pass for white. But that's really an American history expression that came from the South, and we'll be talking about it later in this year. So it's not like more and more generations couldn't necessarily make it happen. But an uglier part of the system, even uglier than what we've already seen, is that mixing with Indians, you could reclaim the Spaniard label for your family. Mixing with Africans, they basically said you couldn't. Ugh.